Hi, I'm Kurt from Kurt's Auto, and this is a 2008 Lincoln MKX that came to me making a bunch of noises. I didn't record the first part of the video because it was pretty standard work. I replaced ball joints, a wheel bearing, and the rack and pinion was leaking power steering fluid, so I went ahead and replaced that. I also found a sway bar link that wasn't all the way tight and it was kind of clunking. So I fixed all of those problems, took the car for a drive, and it started making terrible noise out of the right front. It's like, okay, well, what did I leave loose? So I lifted the car up and checked it all out, and I'm going to show you what I found. So when I first shook the car down and I had the car in the air, actually, I'm going to lift the car up and show you what I found. Okay, so with the car lifted off the ground, I went and I shook it down. I have no side-to-side movement whatsoever. I can't feel any up and down movement. Before, I had the ball joints. You can see how much movement there is in the lower ball joints. So before, when I shook it, the wheel would rock in and out from the lower ball joint. Looking it over, I really couldn't see anything wrong. The struts, and I'll show you this. It has pretty much brand new struts in it. Basically everything in the front end is new and it shouldn't be making any noise. However, we're gonna let it back down and I'll show you what's actually wrong with it. Okay, with all these parts being brand new, obviously there's something wrong because it's making noise. You could just hear it clunking through parking lots, my driveway's gravel, and you could hear every bump. So, with the vehicle on the ground, now I'm gonna shake it side to side and back and forth. This is what I found. I'm actually gonna move you in here so you can see it. All right, so now I got the camera set up here. This bolt right here is the top of the strut. And so with the weight back on the ground, I can actually get that whole mount is completely loose. When I lifted it off the ground, the pressure from the spring made it tight and I couldn't get any movement out of it at all. And the fact that it's brand new, I really didn't think that was my problem. My assumption was that the ball joints and the sway bar link being loose and I could actually move it with my hand and get it to clunk around was making all the noise. So I kind of overlooked the fact that the strut mount is either put together incorrectly or is just defective and falling apart. Unfortunately, with how much room they leave you here and how far down the nut is, I would have to pull the entire cowl out or just remove the strut. I don't think I have to take the cowl out to get these bolts. I think I could throw a ratcheting wrench on them and get them down. So I'm gonna pull the strut out of the car and find out exactly what went wrong with it. And yeah, I'll show you when I get it out. So I removed the wheel and it does have a Quick-Strut in it, meaning that they bought this as an assembly with the spring, the strut, and the mount all in one piece. So the fact that it came apart up there means it's probably just a defective part. Again, I did not put these in, but he doesn't want to take it back to the guy that did. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my 2 strut bolts pulled out, get the hose off of it, and finish getting the strut pulled out, and we'll see what actually is wrong with it. All right, so I got the strut removed, and you can see the bolt is not very centered. I'm gonna compress the spring and take that apart and see why it's actually not lined up. Well, I've gone ahead and taken and put tension on the spring to loosen up the top mount, and just putting a wrench in here, I can turn the nut without turning the strut. So there's no way that that bolt was torqued properly. So it's probably all egged out. I'm gonna take it apart and see if the mount's ruined. My guess is when they manufactured the strut, they did a poor job of it, and it was actually a defect from them not actually properly tightening the strut when they put it together. So it was purchased as an assembly. You shouldn't have had to retorque that nut. I always do because I found several of them loose. This one probably should have been retorqued before it was put in the car. You can actually see with the tension off of it, I mean, it moves around in there terribly. So I'm gonna pull it off and see if it's all egged out or if all I have to do is tighten it up. How damaged is the part? Well, that's definitely not a round hole. That hole is completely ovaled out because that strut's been rocking back and forth in there. The hole is about the size of the socket, but it's ovaled out that much more. Well, and so unfortunately I took a closer look at the strut, and the top of the strut right here seems to be narrowed in from where it was rocking back and forth in the loose mount. So without that bolt being tight, it allowed it to rock back and forth in there. And not only did it damage the mount to the point where the mount is junk, I actually feel like the strut itself is also junk, and we're just gonna have to replace the whole thing. It seems like it undercut that thread, and I'm afraid if I just put a mount on it, even if I get it completely torqued down, there's still gonna be more clearance in there than there's supposed to be, and might cause a problem in the future. So because of the threads possibly being damaged on this strut, I decided just to order an entire new strut, and he can take that one back. I'll put it in the box, and maybe he can get some of his money back from the person who installed it. He doesn't want to take the car back to that person for whatever reason. That's fine. I can't warranty it, but I am going to put a brand new strut in. And before I install it, like I said, what I always like to do, these things are supposed to be done, I always check it. So I'm going to get a torque wrench on here, make sure this nut's completely tight before I install it in the vehicle. That way I make sure I don't have this problem in the future. The other one I already checked in the car with a wrench. I put it on the end that's sticking up, and I can't rotate it at all, so it's good and tight. This one hopefully is. 99% of them are, but every once in a while you will get one that wasn't all the way tightened up at the factory, and this is the result. It ends up causing a problem. So we'll check this one and make sure it's good, and we'll get it installed. We're gonna check the torque, and as you can see, the top nut is torqued to this strut mount. Had that been checked on this one, it never would have failed. It's just one of the deals where this at the assembly plant, whoever put it together didn't get the nut all the way torqued down, and it doesn't happen often, but I have seen it happen. So I always double check them before I install them. This one should be good and take care of this problem. We're gonna get the strut installed back in the car. Usually these things are pretty easy to line up. Unfortunately, this one is not doing that for me. Got it. Right. There it is. Aha. Yeah, get all 4 holes lined up. Hold it in place until you can get a nut started. Good enough, I got 2 of them up there started. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the bottom part here. Undo my strap that I was holding the spindle up with. That way the axle didn't get tugged on. The strut lined up here. And one bolt. And 2 bolts. Almost. Yes. Alright, just like that, I'm going to get the steering knuckle tightened up and we'll get this on the ground. With all the bolts tightened up, I can pull and tug at the top of the tire, and I have no movement on that stud at all. So we should be in great shape, and noise should be fixed. The only thing left to do now is take it for a test drive and just make sure that it's all good to go. But it's one of the problems with struts. If you don't check those bolts to make sure they're actually tightened up before you put them in, sometimes the person at the factory may not have done their job correctly. Well, I just got back from a test drive with the Lincoln, No more noises, no more clunking. Front end's all good. Does need an alignment. I'm gonna send him to have that done. And yeah, for the length of time it takes to check that bolt on the top of the strut, I recommend that you do that if you're ever putting in quick struts, because sometimes the factory just doesn't get it all the way tightened up. So the one that I put in, I double checked it and it was tight, and the driver's side doesn't have a problem. But it's starting to rain, so with that, thanks for watching, like and subscribe.